Okay, so lecture one. What we're going to start out with is just thinking about files. So, how do files actually work? And so, this is something that's part of your life probably every single day, but it's not something that everybody always really thinks about intentionally. We don't think about the storage system. We just, print out the paper or submit the paper to eCampus. So, we're going to look at how files actually work. We're going to look at some storage options and preventing lost work. There's a lot of different things involved in this. And like I've said in the intro, this is not going to be exhaustive. I'm going to give you kind of the key points, and I'm going to point you in the direction to find more about anything you could want to find about. So, our learning objectives for the module, this first module, are all on the screen. In this lecture, we're specifically going to be thinking about file pathways and starting to get into the differences between local storage, network drives, cloud storage, all of those different types of things, just so you can kind of know where the files are once you know what they are. So, we're starting with files because that's generally where the issues lie for most college students. So, I think I'm a millennial, and so I kind of grew up in that period where computers weren't assumed. We didn't expect that everybody had certain knowledge about it. And so I had a lot of classes that were really specifically teaching us how to do all of these different things. Most of you have come up in a time where everybody just expects that people know it. And so because of that, there's been decisions that mean that you're not explicitly taught things that are kind of fundamentals almost to using a computer. And so this is hopefully going to fill in the gaps that exist because of that. And so I feel for you guys that you missed out on that. A lot of those computer classes were not the most interesting things, but they're really useful. And so, one of the foundational things that you guys haven't been made to think about um, is just how to save files, where to save files, how to kind of figure out what strategy works for you, how to have that kind of consistent organization across different places. So, like with WVU, you have access to Word and OneDrive, but you also have Google Drive. And so that can just add a lot more confusion to it. I know a lot of you do assignments on your phones, and so then you're saving it even another place there. So we have to understand why we need to have the organization that comes with file structures to be able to kind of do anything else beyond that. And a lot of your assignments in this class are going to relate to just the basics of like saving a file. So hopefully it's going to be something that's really easy for you. And hopefully a lot of this is going to be repetition. And you're like, why is she making me listen to this? And if that's the case, then we all win. If not, just in case, here's the information. So, what is a file? The file is something that contains information. So, you engage with files constantly. Like when you take a picture and it saves on your phone, that is a file. So, you're not necessarily thinking about it as a file, you're thinking about it as a picture, an image that you can share. But still, it has a home, right? There's a pathway, there's a place that somebody could track down where it is saved actually on your phone. So that's the file path, the home address, it's where it lives essentially. And if for some reason that changes, then you can't find that file anymore. So the structure needs to be informed of any changes that are made, right? So it's the same as, like, to use the analogy of it being your home. If you move but you don't put in a change of address, your postal service is not going to be able to find you to deliver your packages, right? So it's the same sort of idea, just on a slightly different sort of scale. And so these paths, or the home addresses, are going to be different on a PC versus a Mac versus whatever cloud system that you're using. So it's also important to know the difference between all of those. So here are some examples of those differences. The C drive, that's like your hard drive. That's where all the important stuff lives. And so on a PC, it's actually listed as a C. On a Mac, it's Macintosh hard drive. Google Drive is kind of the equivalent to that too. It's the most foundational piece, and everything kind of branches out from that. And so these file paths, you don't need to memorize the actual paths for all of your assignments. You just need to be able to kind of know, like, trace that directory, trace the lineage of all of these things backward, so you can kind of figure out the root, create a system from that makes sense. And it should be something that is logical to you. So the way that my brain works and organizes things might be very different from the way that yours does. And so that's fine. I'll give you examples, but you still need to create something that actually makes sense for you. So don't waste time trying to memorize all of this. I'm not going to be quizzing you on specific paths or anything like that. Just what is the most logical in whatever situation. So these are some examples that I've pulled from the web. So this is on a PC. Um, logical, right? It still's got the same foundation with the C and the user, and then it's usually going to be your name. Like when you get a new computer and you start it up, it'll have you fill out your information like that. And then your desktop's always going to be like the home space. My desktop is usually quite messy, and I'm not perfect for all of this. Everything that we talk about in this class, I'm going to tell you what best practice is. That's not necessarily what I do, and it doesn't necessarily need to be what you do all the time, but still to understand the value that comes with that. With a Mac, you can kind of see it at the bottom here, maybe blow up the screen a little bit to make it more visible. And so this is somebody who has a lot of folders kind of branching out. And so there's parent folders, child folders, just to like really go into a more detailed kind of organization. And so I can say when I was working on my PhD and I had all the data that I was collecting, I had things that had many, many files like this, many folders. When I'm teaching a class, usually it'll be more like desktop courses and then the name of the class, and then I'll have a folder for assignments, a folder for reading. So it doesn't get as intense as what you see here, but it can. And so sometimes there's value in having that extent of organization. This is an example from my Google Drive. And so you can see in this too, like the little person in the folder, that means that it's a shared folder. And that's something we're going to get into in this class later on as well. But you can still see across the top the file path. In Google Drive, everything is more simplified. And so we're going to talk about that a lot. Google Drive and Google Docs versus Word, and how it still gets the essentials, but it's not to the same extreme. And so you can see that here in the file paths for sure. So we also have local storage versus cloud versus external. And so local is your computer, right? It's local to you. It's something that you can take with you now. Generally, most of you probably don't have desktops or use desktops as much. You probably use laptops or even tablets. And so it's quite quick to save to that. It's private. Hopefully your computers are locked, right? When you close them, you have to sign back in when you open it again. So it's private and you have that kind of level of security there where you're the only person who can access it. But if you spill your coffee on your computer, which I did right at the beginning of COVID, it was excellent timing, then you lose everything on that computer, right? So it's nice to have the privacy of it, but it is also very risky if that's the only thing that you have. So that's why a lot of people will use cloud storage. So sometimes people will just save everything in the cloud and that's where it all exists. And in those situations, you are dependent on whoever offers that cloud storage to continue to exist. So like we have Microsoft OneDrive and Google, those are quite secure, at least in the world as it is currently. We don't expect that those are going to just disappear overnight, but there are potential risks there, right? With hackers, or a lot of times you will use up the storage that you have there. And so then you end up having to buy extra storage. And so you become dependent on this like monthly fee to keep that space, to keep your stuff there. So there's another risk with that. A lot of people will do both. So they'll have everything saved on their desktop, but then also have a copy in the cloud just in case. And so that's probably what is best practice. I don't always do that. You can set up your computer to automatically sync to your cloud if you have the space and you think that's the right kind of storage mechanism for you. And there's also external storage. And so that's like a thumb drive, things that you can carry with you. A lot of times those are useful if you're like bringing something into a class for a presentation. You can plug it into the computer in the class, and then you're not dependent on the internet. A lot of times now with the cloud, like we have internet outages on campus. If the internet's out and you don't have things saved on local or usually external storage, you can't do anything. And so like for me teaching a class, if I don't have access to my Google Drive, actually, I'm very much out of luck. So having the external drive where you can plug it in, you have everything there. Generally, they're smaller, so you can't have everything on a thumb drive. They're getting bigger, so you might be able to. But really, so these three options are all good and they all have their different uses and the different times when they're going to be the best choice for you. But you really just need to know where your stuff is. And so you can have the thumb drive plugged into your computer and save to that and think that you're saving to your desktop, but actually it's on the thumb drive. You leave the thumb drive at home, you come back and you're trying to submit your paper, work on your paper, and it's not on your computer, and then, you're out of luck. So know all three, use all three, be aware of them kind of at all times as much as you can. And so autosave is something that has kind of come about more recently, at least in my perspective, more recently. And it's great when you're working on like a Google Doc, it'll automatically save everything. So you don't have to kind of, for me, it almost gets the paranoia when I'm working on Word on the desktop. I'll just control save constantly, just in case, just to make sure it's there. Um, but so with Drive or Google Docs, you don't have to do that. Word Desktop will generally, if you have it set up, save into OneDrive. Um, you can change that to save just to your desktop or to do both. And Word Online is more like Google Docs, and so that's, I think, maybe becoming more popular, more commonly used now. So it's great, but just don't depend on that. That it's like it's an extra, it's a perk. It's not the way that you should always be planning for saving your things. So if you're working on something as a Google Doc, keep it there for sure, but maybe every once in a while save a hard copy to your hard drive so you have it just in case something goes wrong. Sometimes I will be working in a Google Doc and then my dog decides that he wants more attention and he'll come and walk across my computer screen and start typing. And so who knows what could happen, but I've had it happen before where he's typing on it, like selects text somehow. I don't even know how, just, you know, the luck, I guess. He'll select a bunch of text and then type over it, and then the window closes. And so then I have to go back in. And luckily, Google Docs has a version history thing that we'll talk about later where I can go retrieve the old one, but still in that moment, there's like the panic of it all being deleted in front of my eyes. So that can often happen with autosave if you're not kind of being on guard like that. And then students lose work a lot. So do professors. I recently have a study abroad that I'm hoping to offer in the summer, and I've found the PDF version of the syllabus, but I can't find the Word version of the syllabus. And so I have an older version. So apparently I forgot to save the most recent as a Word doc. I just saved it as a PDF. And so I have an older version history. We're going to talk about this again more later. So it's a half done document essentially. And so I'm going to have to go through and kind of deal with the conversion of the PDF into the doc to be able to make any edits to it. And so that happens a lot. A lot of times people will open an attachment from their email. And so it saves in downloads maybe and gets lost, or maybe it just doesn't even save at all. It's a temporary file that they've opened, but they're still doing work on it. And so then all of that time and energy is just lost. A lot of times, again, people will close something before saving. Most things will kind of remind us, but not always. So you're not always going to get that little box that pops up and say, are you sure you want to close this without saving? Most of the time we can kind of rely on that, but you can have, accidents happen. Again, coffee spills on your computer before you save it, it's gone. Even if you can kind of dry it out and get the computer back, if you didn't save it, that's lost work. Or a lot of times people will save multiple versions of something. There can be unsynced changes in cloud folders. There's just all different sorts of things that will often end up in students losing work. And so I know you don't want to put out any more extra effort than you have to, right? So if you do something, you have a paper that you're happy with, you want to make sure that it's going to kind of exist when you come back to it in the future. So that's why this file structure and saving and knowing where you're saving is so important. So what you should be taking away from this is that you should have some sort of consistent system. You need to have a known place where your files are going to go. So pick whatever the best strategy for you is as kind of a first line, and then choose a backup. So if you prefer to save on the cloud, maybe have your backup be saving on a thumb drive. And then maybe once you've submitted that paper, you're done with that class, you can take it away from the thumb drive. You can clear up that space by deleting it, and it'll still be in the cloud, but it's not something that you need to have regular access to. Or save it on your desktop and then use the cloud as your backup. Whatever it is, that's fine. Just figure out the thing that makes sense for you. And what we're going to do in this class partially is work on cleaning up file spaces. So if some of this, are things that you're like, actually, I don't think I do that, or I don't know where that is, or I don't know how to find those files, hopefully by the end of your kind of main assignment for this first module, you will have at least started to get a new plan to be able to handle that.